Long Hall, which is where you are right now. And so to kick off our month, we'll be having something every weekend. We're going to have some people that will be lecturing for us today on various aspects of the history of Farmington. So I encourage everybody to pay attention to the Discover Farmington website so that you can keep up with what's going on for the month. The first speaker of the day is Bob Mueller, and Bob is an independent researcher, genealogist, writer, speaker, reenactor, and a tour guide for the living history in St. Genevieve, Missouri. Bob is a 1964 graduate of Farmington St. Joseph High School and has 2 engineering degrees from what is now Missouri University of Science and Technology in Mueller. Bob is a current member of Les Amis, Missouri, which means the Friends, correct? And this is an Alliance for Historic Preservation. And Mairie de Sainte Genevieve, which is the militia for St. Genevieve, and the Sons of the Union Veterans of the Civil War. He's been a trustee of the State Historical Society of Missouri since 2006 and a member of their executive committee since 2009. Mr. Mueller also serves on the board for the Center for French Colonial Studies. He's a member and past president of the Foundation for Restoration of St. Genevieve and coordinates the Foundation's annual History Conference and Speakers Bureau. So be with me and welcome Mr. Bob Mueller.
Thank you very much. I hope this is brief for me. Historians can talk forever, especially if they're a genealogist. I call my talk Roads Long Traveled for a couple of reasons, but I want to first talk about something very personal. As we grow older in life, there are sounds, there's foods, there's images that kind of take you back to your childhood. And there's one of those for me that has been in my life since I was in grade school, and it's about Long Memorial Hall. Our teachers, I went to St. Joseph Grade School, they decided we need to do a book report, so they brought us up to the library, and we got to pick out a book. And I picked out a book called A Horse to Remember. It's no longer in the library because I checked with Travis. But when I got my book report back, there was a big check mark, red check mark on the title. I had misspelled the word remember. And to this day, I have to hesitate when I spell remember. And I use that word a lot. One of the neat things that happened, I was working with Ryan, and he sent me this picture of the library, but he sent me another picture that, this is on your banner for this, and that's me, the second person to the left. And some of my classmates, I have one of my classmates here today, but I think this was probably when I went up to find that book, A Horse to Remember, and the lady on the left, not the nun, is Genevieve Huss, a great teacher. She taught my dad in high school, she taught me in kindergarten, and she taught me in high school. She was fantastic. It really got me into my love of history. I'm going to talk just a little bit about William Dubart Long. Ryan's going to talk a lot more about that. He was born, as you know, in the Long House in 1840. Philip Graham Long and Isabella Murphy, descendants of some of the founders of St. Farmington. He was known as Doobie for most of his life. And he was related to Sarah Jane Martin and William Francis Murphy, so great roots. The Dubart name was Sarah Martin Murphy's mother's name, and that's where it shows up in the genealogy of the Long family as first names, middle names for a lot. So he was the 5th child of, some sites say 10 children, some say 11, some say 12, so I'm not really sure which. His next oldest sister was Jane Ambrose Long. His father farmed, had a tannery, and he expected his children to help. They didn't get to just play games like they do now. When Dubark was 11, the Missouri legislature authorized the building of plank roads. The act provided for the condemnation of ground, authorized the taking of timber and stone, subscription of stock, and issuance of bonds. Now, there was, so there were 47 plank roads authorized in the state of Missouri, but only 17 were built. The St. Genevieve, Iron Mountain, and Pilot Knob Railroad was the longest of those at 42 miles. A lot of people like to say it was the longest in the nation. It was not. There was one 126 miles long down in the Carolinas, but it was the longest in Missouri. Stocks were tax exempt as long as the road permitted soldiers, ammunition, cannonballs, railroad iron, and granite for the state to pass free of tolls. And we had a lot of granite just west of here. As a boy of 12, born in 1840, 1852, he probably saw men starting to lay wooden stringers down this street right out in front of us here, and they would put 4-inch thick boards sideways on those stringers, and it went from Iron Mountain down to the middle of St. Genevieve down to the river. They would also place stone markers ever so often, and we actually still have one of those in our museum in St. Genevieve. This, should have my computer in front of me. That picture is from a 1927 Farmington newspaper. A guy named Robert Forsythe drew that. And we borrow it in St. Genevieve quite frequently. He and his buddies might have also hitched a ride on one of the wagons, and they would have about 50 to 100 wagons a day going from Iron Mountain to St. Genevieve. Going east, they had the right-of-way. This was only an 8-foot wide road. And they would be drawn by mules or oxen. And so it was pretty slow. It would take about 3 to 5 days to do a round trip. But I imagine he and his buddies would hop on one of those wagons and they'd go out to Clardy Grove on the west side of Farmington, where there was a toll gate. There was also one on the east side of Farmington, out at the junction of Karsh Boulevard and St. Genevieve Avenue. There's a memorial stone in Long Park that memorializes that. So he would probably go to each of those. One of the things he probably also liked to do, there was also toll booths at Iron Mountain, and one at 12 Mile outside of St. Genevieve, and one on 10th Street in St. Genevieve. So that was the places where they had to do it. I understand at one time there was a strike by the drivers for how much they had to pay for the tolls. I think it was 25 cents, but that was worth a lot of money then. I think that Dubark might have also hitched a ride out to what we call Valley Forge, just east of town on Wolf Creek. There was several big knobbling furnaces where they would make boilerplate using ore or pig iron from Iron Mountain. There was also a big mill there called the Valley Forge Flouring Mill, which was later bought by Mr. Giesing, and then he eventually moved his mill into Farmington here. In 1859, there was a train track built from Iron Mountain up to St. Louis. And that would really spell the demise of the plank road. Now they could ship their iron ore and their pig iron right up to the mills in St. Louis. And that, along with the very high maintenance costs, when you're taking 1,000 pounds of iron across that wooden road, it wore out pretty quick. So this was, as I said, the demise of that plank road. Now, the plank road, it's not the end of it. In 1861, the legislature said, okay, we're going to split it up into 2 sections, one in St. Francis County and one in St. Genevieve County. The county of St. Genevieve bought their section. Farmington formed something called the St. Francis County Gravel Road Company. And until about, trying to think when they had bought that back on, 1902 is when the county of St. Francis had that road, and they covered it with crushed stone. By that time, the wooden logs and beams had already worn out. Most of what is now Highway 32, and I guess W going out of town to the west here, maybe 221, is what constitutes the Plank Road, 42 miles long. Never did go to Pilot Mountain. By the time they decided to build that section, they already figured out this isn't economical, so they didn't do it. There's all kinds of funny things that have happened. St. Genevieve had bonds, they didn't want to pay off the bonds, so they had the county court declare the town a new name and said that, no, we don't have to pay it because we're a different town. Well, it's called Welsh versus the city of St. Genevieve. St. Genevieve lost, had to do a special tax for 10 years to pay off the bonds. When Dubert came of age, and I'm not sure what that, I guess he would have been almost 21 at the time from what they said. He left St. Genevieve, or left Farmington to seek his fame and fortune. He may have hitched a ride to St. Genevieve on a stagecoach or a hack, and to take a steamboat from there up north, or he might have got somebody to drive him over to Bismarck and take a train there. Well, here on this one, this is an old map of the city of Farmington. You can see that on both the east and west side, it is gravel road. So here's the train that came through, and it originally came from St. Louis through Carondelet down to almost to Pilot Knob. It didn't come through Farmington. So when Dubert, after he had moved away to Canada to seek his fame and fortune, when he came back, he would either have to go to St. Genevieve and get a hack over to Farmington, or he would have to go to Bismarck and have somebody bring him all the way into Farmington. Dubert would find his way up to Hamilton, Ontario, and I know Ryan's going to talk about that phase of his life, but he became a very successful businessman, a major benefactor to the town of Hamilton, and then in 1920, died there due to complications of pneumonia. So Dubert spent his adult life almost 800 miles north of Farmington, but he never forgot his boyhood home of Farmington. And he never gave up his American citizenship, even though he lived in Canada. A 1919 Hamilton, Ontario newspaper said that Dubert took pleasure in visiting the scenes of his boyhood home. And if you look in the newspapers here, you see many references to him coming home, spending a month or so in the Longhouse, and then going back to Canada. Then in about 1860, after 1869, they would build another branch of the Iron Mountain and St. Louis Railroad. So it's called the Belmont branch, and it comes from Bismarck all the way down to Belmont. I think that's probably in Boot Hill, Missouri. But it didn't come to Farmington. It came to Delasu. And the word is that the reason it didn't come to Farmington was that they had asked Farmington to raise $30,000 in a bond issue, and the city did not do that. So it went to Delasu. The people of Farmington continued to investigate railroads. They planned to build a railroad from St. Mary's on the Mississippi to Farmington. There's also the Saline Valley Railroad that happened. That failed financially. In 1887, they were going to build a narrow gauge railroad between Farmington and Delasu, but that didn't happen. But they would actually achieve their connection with You can see on the slide on the right that, so here's Farmington, here's Delasu down here, and you can see that Belmont line. So they still had to go, I think that was about 4.5 miles to get there. But after 1900, the city fathers of Farmington did decide to build something called the Electric Railroad. And it went from here in town, out Columbia Avenue, over to Iron Mountain. They started in 1902, it was completed in 1904, July 24th was the first day. Some of the investors took the first ride, and by the end of that day, 700 people had ridden that electric train. The station was located at the 200 block of South Washington, which in my day was Hex IGA. I think, what is it, Wine and Spirits now, out there. And the powerhouse was located about 2 miles north of Farmington on the Flat River line. So they also built a line from here to, I think, Flat River and to Esther, and miners that worked over there at the lead mines would take the electric train. So when they got to Bonne Terre, or Flat River, there was the Bonne Terre Railroad, which went north, or at Esther was the Illinois Southern. So that was now a way that connected Farmington to the rest of the world via rail. They had 4 cars. They were powered by overhead wires, like some of the old street cars. But in later years, a diesel was used to power those rail cars. Passenger service was discontinued in 1951, and the last freight shipment was in 1957. And for many years, I guess there were, you could see parts of the rail. Here's a couple of pictures. That's up on the upper left is the train station, and on the lower right is the powerhouse that was used for that. And here you can see that you can see the rail line. They kind of ran down to Delaware City. And here's the entire line that went and connected all of those rails. And let's see, I guess this would be a picture of the train tracks out in front of the Methodist Church, just right up the street here, actually. Dubert, in many of his trips during his lifetime, would come down Columbia Avenue from the train station or whatever. It would be a dirt road. Well, dirt in dry weather, mud in wet weather. And it would later be the plank road, and then it would be a gravel road. But Dubert would live long enough to see Columbia Street lit at night after 1891, when you got electricity. It was nice. And later, it was just around the courthouse, it was paved with macadam between Washington and Jefferson in 1901. He would also not live to see the paving of streets on 8 blocks in Farmington's business district, which began in August 1925. So the streets around here were not very good until that time period. Or the next year, when the city board approved paving West Columbia from A Street to Boyce and 2 blocks on East Columbia. So transportation changed significantly during Dubert's lifetime. He traveled many different roads. And he traveled his last trip in 1920 came when his remains were brought here from Hamilton, Ontario. After a service at the Methodist Episcopal Church just up the street, his body made its final journey down Columbia Street to the long burial plot in the Masonic Cemetery at the corner of Carter and South Henry. I have to say that the surface of the track road and track railroads that Dubert long traveled during his lifetime have been memorialized in the Farmington Public Library mural. Actually, it's, there it is. So this is a big mural that was painted by Michael Koenig in 1981, based on a drawing by one of Farmington's former mayors, Mayor Ledbetter. And when I looked at that drawing, you see a lot of those roads that long traveled. You see the train, you see the ox carts on the plank road, and you also see the electric railroad. So he traveled a lot of roads during his career, and it's a pleasure that you are memorializing him in this building and in this 100-year anniversary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you gonna
So you can now get them at the Civic Center as well. So you can just walk in and you want tickets and get them at the Civic Center. After that tea party, you'll be able to go down to Longhouse and tour Longhouse and the grounds where the tannery was. On the 19th will be a Roaring Twenties dance here in Long Hall because this building was given on Halloween in 1924, so it's that 100th celebration. So we thought that was an appropriate dance. Then on the 26th, in the evening, we'll start at the old jail museum, and you can tour the jail and visit with the old sheriff and his wife, and then you can take a horse and buggy up to the Masonic Cemetery, and you'll see Dubart, his mother Isabella, Barney Pelty, who was a baseball player, and other local citizens from Farmington. So now I would like to introduce Karen Kleinberg. Karen has lived in Farmington area for 46 years, along with her husband Glenn and her daughters Wendy and Lori. She's a proud member of the Sarah Barton Murphy chapter of the National Society of Daughters of the American Revolution and the General Federated Women's Clubs International, and she's past president of the Monday chapter, and she's the current treasurer. Karen and the members of the Monday Club are proud caretakers of the Longhouse, and she's here to share that history with us today. Karen?
For any of you that haven't had a chance yet, these are some of our, I don't have a fancy slideshow, but I brought different things that are from the Longhouse, and you all are more than welcome to take a look at what we have here. And a lot of that stuff I'll be talking about. The original Longhouse was built in 1833 by the late Philip Graham and Isabella Murphy Long. Philip is the son of Griffin and Sarah Graham Long of Caldwell, Kentucky, and Isabella is the daughter of Dubart and Sarah Bacon Long, and the granddaughter of William and Sarah Barton Murphy Long. Philip and Isabella were married in Farmington on January 15, 1833. From census records and death certificates, Philip and Isabella had 11 children. And again, there's some conflict as to how many exactly. Frances Long was born in 1842 and died at 8 months of age, and Betty was born in 1853 and died at 12 years of age. All of their other children, Sarah, Catherine, Eliza, Jane, Ambrose, Jenny, William Dubart, Dewey, Isabella, Philip Graham Long, Graham Jr., Hugh, and Horace all lived to adulthood. Several marriages took place at the Longhouse. William Hunt and Sarah Long, Jackson Murphy and Catherine Long, George Wilson and Isabella Long, and Harvey Bisbee and Jenny Long. Death also claimed Philip Long Sr., Philip Long Jr., Francis, and Betty at the house. Philip and Isabella and 9 of their children are all buried at the Masonic Cemetery South in Farmington. Eliza Ball Evans is buried at the Oddfellow Cemetery, and Jane Ambrose Bisbee is buried at the West Winfield Cemetery in West Winfield, New York, along with her husband. The original house was built of log construction that contained 1 room downstairs and 1 room upstairs, with an enclosed stairway and a fireplace. As the family grew, other additions were made. The first was to the south of the original home, with a room downstairs and a room above, enclosing the dog run, or in present-day terms, a breezeway, with a stairway to the upper, low-ceiling rooms. Much later, an addition was built to the north of the original house, also with a room downstairs and a room above, with its individual stairway. Thus, the house contained 3 units, each with its own stairway, and a room was added for the kitchen and the bathroom as an L to the north section of the house. The original and south addition, where the log construction was beautiful hand-hewed logs. The third and the kitchen additions were of clapboard construction. At the time of adding the north section, the entire house was clapboard covered, and that probably has helped preserve those logs that are under that house today. You can see the logs from inside the house in the center room, but you can't from the outside. But we had some work done on the house. They took a section of that siding off, so from the outside you could see those logs on the outside. The log house has been part of several historic events. In late 1837, the Cherokee Trail of Tears detachment took route through Missouri from Cape Girardeau through St. Francis County on into Missouri and eventually into Oklahoma. The Plank Road was built in St. Genevieve 1851, and by 1853 it was going through Farmington and eventually into Iron County. From paperwork we have found in the log house, the house was called the House of the Circuit Rider, where the doors were always open to entertainment, which was enjoyed by many. From an article from the Farmington Times written on Thursday, April 23rd, 1903, as Mr. Williams said, Mr. DeBart Long and his sister, Mrs. Bisbee of Hamilton, Ontario, arrived here Tuesday for a visit of some weeks and will occupy the old homestead during their stay. In time, the house was passed on by Jenny Long, who in 1921 willed the house and surrounding area to the city of Farmington. It was used by nieces and a great-nephew as a residence up until 1921, and after the city acquired the property, for a time it was used as a residence of the city park superintendent. During World War II and into the 1950s, the upstairs south room was used as a nursery school for children of employed mothers of a local manufacturing company, which we believe was the shirt factory just right down on First Street. Several children who I had the pleasure to talk to who attended this nursery school told me stories of sleeping on Army-style cots, of playing outside on a merry-go-round and doing pull-ups on 2 different levels of bars, and smelling lunch being cooked downstairs. In the spring of 1951, the city decreed to raise the house because of its age and uselessness. The Monday Club, a federated women's club, numbering 25 members, protested the destruction by attending a city council meeting. In the spring of 1952, the Monday Club offered to lease the house from the city for a short period to enable the group to determine how it could be saved as a place of historic interest. Beginning at once, as the first move, repairs were made sufficient for the safety of the building. Then began diligent work by the members of the Monday Club to interest other clubs and civic organizations in completing restoration. In some paperwork that we located at the Longhouse, those other organizations were the LaPierre McAllister Post 416, the Nancy Weber, Farmington, Victory, and 25 Gardeners Garden Clubs, the Oak Grove, ICU, and Libertyville Extension Clubs, the Newcomer Club, Teen Town Group, Boy Scouts, Farm Bureau, Rotary Club, Business and Professional Women's Club, the League of Women Voters, and the Chamber of Commerce. A council of all those organizations were formed, and their support was given and bids were secured for the work. Fundraisers were held at the St. Francis County Fair and by private residents of the Farmington. The city of Farmington agreed to assume 1/3 of the cost, the Monday Club 1/3, and other interested groups the final 1/3. Work was completed in the late summer of 1954. To defray part of the expense, the Monday Club sponsored Farmington's first homecomings, which I wonder now is what we consider country days. Other means of raising money was promoted by the various organizations, and through this combined effort and help from the city, the last payment of restoration was made in 1954. The contract did not include interior decorations other than painting the woodwork, but the Monday Club continued working for completion of the interior. In 1961, the State Historical Society of Missouri sent a letter to Mr. Albert Karsh, interested in adding the Longhouse in a survey of historic houses. In February of 1962, Mr. Karsh sent a completion of material from old newspaper files regarding the Longhouse, along with 12 exterior and 12 interior pictures with a detailed description of each room. We are lucky to find this information in the Longhouse, and I now have it in a binder for our records. And Mr. Karsh's efforts were not not in vain, as the Longhouse is now listed in the 1963 Missouri Historic Sites Catalog. In the summer of 1967, the south room and the adjoining hallway were decorated with gifts of beautiful parlor furniture, and the house had a now complete parlor. The central room was the original log and chinking interior, and the north room and kitchen are used for club meetings and entertainment. The north room upstairs is furnished as a lounge, all set up to play a game or checkers. Okay. Is it on? Did you turn it off? Jesse, you turned it off.
It was just too low.
Okay, see, the north room upstairs is furnished as a lounge, and it's now all set up to play a game of bridge or checkers. The center room upstairs is still considered the bedroom, and the south upstairs room has been restored as the children's room. And for some of us, that's Lori's favorite room to be in. Many items of furniture have been purchased by the Monday Club, donated by their members and other community members, and some on loan, all in keeping with the style of the house. In the mid-1950s, the Longhouse was used as a loan and gift closet from the American Cancer Society. The Beta Sigma Phi sorority worked with the American Cancer Society. There are posters, donation cans, clothing, bandages, and medical equipment still located in the Longhouse from this project. And we have several of those items on display. I found these two robes in the closet over the week, this past week, and I never saw those before, but I think they're better coverage than what they get at the hospital now. In May 1955, the Longhouse featured a spring flower show and art exhibit from several garden clubs located in Farmington. And in July of 1960, it just went off again. It went off again. In July of 65, 66, and 67, the Longhouse was the site of the Old Settlement Festival and Homecoming. There were tours of the Longhouse each day that served as a fundraiser for the Longhouse and the GFWC Monday Club. We have found several guest books in the Longhouse with the names of those who attended those events, and one of those little girls is now a member of our Monday Club. That's Sandy Dickey Reed. On the north lawn stands a granite pyramidal structure.
Hold it down.
Pyramidal structure identifying the site as the first industry in Farmington, the tannery that was owned by Philip Graham Long. When this marker was built, a stone was placed. Do I have to hold it?
Shouldn't. Just hold it down for a second, it should work.
I did. It's on now. When this marker was built, a stone was placed by every remaining member of the Long family. The Longhouse is available to any group for meetings and parties. In the past, many families have used the house for reunions, and the adjoining park makes it an ideal spot. A preliminary National Register of the Historic Place eligibility assessment was submitted to the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. This process can take several years, and we are currently gathering more information to help this application be successful. In the spring of 2023, the City of Farmington allowed money in their budget for restoration of the Longhouse. The first project was to update the columns in the front of the house and restore the floor of the top deck and the banisters. The second project was to restore and level the floor in the original part of the Longhouse. The original floorboards were used once the house was leveled. Over the past years, the ladies of the GFWC Monday Club have hosted tours of the Longhouse during.
I think the battery's dead. Don't worry about it.
Going.
We can hear you.
Okay, I'll do this. Over the past years, the ladies of the Monday Club have hosted tours of Longhouse during Country Days, the Missouri Bicentennial, the arrival of the Remember the Riders Twice, the Trail of Tear Riders from from Oklahoma and gave tours on the grounds and the house to 3rd and 4th graders from Washington Franklin School this past summer. For the past 3 years, the house has been decorated for Christmas, and tours have been available from the community. The first time we decorated the house, we all wondered when was the last time this house was decorated for Christmas. We have been blessed to have community members portray Santa and also dress in period clothing, playing the piano, and singing Christmas carols. Members of the GFWC Monday Club will continue to honor those ladies before them by keeping the history of the Longhouse alive. I want to close with a poem from 1962 that was published and written by Alfred Jones, and it's called The Old House, Old Year. There's an old house in Farmington that was noisy once and gay, but the walls are strangely silent now, for the family went away. So friends take care of the old house, and they keep within its walls the heirlooms old from a treasured store that a happy past recalls. There's an old year that is closing now, and we have dwelt with therein, shall move anon to a new abode, and a brand new year begin. But within the walls of the old year that was 1962, we will keep a room with the memories of the happy hours we knew.
Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Dr. Ryan Johnston. I'm a Farmington High School graduate of class of 1999, as well as a chiropractor graduate of Logan College of Chiropractic. I will be presenting Long Memorial Hall, 100 Years History, and we will begin that now. So this picture here is a photograph of Long Memorial Hall, one of the earliest that I could find. Built in 1924, this photograph shows the building before the landscaping was put in place, kind of the original building structure and how it would have sat. You can see nicely the two offset L's on either side that house the library and the lights and water, as well as some of the old barns that were still in place off to the side of that as well. So before the Long Memorial Hall was in this place, the Old Weber Hotel was here, one of the premier mansions along Columbia Street before it was taken down to make way for the Long Memorial Hall, owned by Judge Weber, and they had several very well-known parties that they would host at these houses, very well known for their hospitality. That building was taken down, like I said, and then donated by Jane Jeannie Ambrose Long Bisbee. She was the wife of George Harvey Bisbee, who we'll learn about a little bit later in the presentation, as well as the daughter of Philip Graham Long and Isabella Murphy Long. Isabella Murphy Long is pictured up here to my right, your left. And the building was dedicated in memory of her brother, William Dubert, or Judy Long, and they were descendants of David Murphy, one of the original founders of Farmington. The building was originally dedicated October 31st, 1924. And Judy was a well-known local as far as the early town of Farmington was concerned. He was born in Farmington, November 1840. He lived over in the Long Memorial Hall, which we heard about Long House, which we heard about from Miss Kleinberg. The fifth child of Philip Graham Long and Isabella Murphy, as well as the great-grandson of William Murphy and Sarah Barton Murphy. So when Dewey was a young boy, the plank road, as we heard from Mr. Bob, was installed from St. Genevieve through to Farmington. And when he was 14 years old, in 1854, he joined his father in the family farming and tanning operation. Now, tanning at this time was a very messy job. It required lots of water, lots of fresh water to flush and wash the hides, as well as a very caustic substance known as lime. The limestone plateau that Farmington's located on has an abundant source of lime, and they would have been able to do this operation very well. The plank road running out in front of their house would have been all animal operations. So you're thinking harnesses, you're thinking reins, all the leather goods that have to go with operation of that type of transportation. That would have all taken place the tanning operation at the Long Tannery. They would have joined with the harness makers and the other saddle makers and things of that nature to then repair and replace all of those as people were using them on the plank road. A memorial to that tannery is located over in Long Park, measuring about 4 foot wide at the base and 7 foot tall, stones being placed on that by the surviving members of the Long family when that was installed. Now, tanning at that time looks a little bit more like this. You're going to have pits, open pits, and you need large areas where you can lay leather out to dry after it's been tanned. The old plat of city of Farmington, it'll be a little bit hard to see, but if you know the town very well, to the east side in the big area that is Long Park now, it is the area that they would have been operating as tannery. They have plenty of open space to lay out those hides to dry. They've also got plenty of space and plenty of fresh water. If you'll notice, there's a spring and a creek that flows directly across their property that would have been a constant supply of water source for this operation. Now, in his early 20s, about 21 years old, Doobie decided that he was going to go off, leave Farmington, and he began engaging in steamboating on the Osage River. He was working in the interest of a company called Mueller, Murphy and Company, and their business had a steamboat landing at Lynn Creek with an ideal kind of sandy bottom landing for a steamboat. And they were doing a pretty large amount of business from that operation, with some years doing business in the range of about $500,000, which for the time and place is a substantial operation. Now, they were operating 4 steamboats, the Emma, the Alliance, the Mary C, and the Lynn Creek, which were used to transport goods up and down the Osage River. Steamboats at that time would have looked a little bit more like this. This is one of the steamboats of that era on the Osage River, not one of their steamboats, but very close to it. The steamboat Emma was used to pull snags, which are fallen logs that can sink steamboats. So when they were opening up the Osage River, this steamboat was used to kind of pull all of those snags so that it was safe for other routes, for other boats to use that route. The Steamboat Alliance sank in 1855 on the Osage River with a reported $40,000 worth of cargo on board. And typically your upstream cargo would consist mainly of the things that you needed to live. So your salt, iron, groceries, occasionally some liquor, but generally your liquor is going to be flowing the other direction downstream. Considerable amounts of corn whiskey going down to St. Louis and New Orleans, as well as your other subsistencies like venison, bacon, slabs, fur, skins, corn, and wheat. So those were the types of things they were transporting through the interior of Missouri. Now, the McClure in the group of that interest was what would become Governor McClure of Missouri. Now, this time he was not yet governor, so in 1841, Mr. McClure married Mary Johnston, the stepdaughter of William Murphy Jr., and entered into a decades-long association with the Murphy family. And at the start of the Civil War, Colonel McClure organized the Osage Regiment of the Missouri Volunteers and the Hickory County Battalion for the Union Army. This did not endure him very much with the Confederate sympathizers in that area, and then on September 1861, their store in Lynn Creek was robbed and burned. During a 2-day robbery, 150 Confederate sympathizers showed up at their store, took all of the individuals and family associated with the store captive and held them prisoner for the duration of that 2-day robbery, and looted approximately reported $110,000 worth of merchandise from their store. They also confiscated one of the steamboats, but as best I can tell, they weren't able to actually take that because the river was too low, they couldn't float it. So they likely burned it or tried to incapacitate it somehow. Colonel McClure was absent at the time of the robbery. He was up in Jeff City in command of the regiment there. Mr. Murphy was in St. Louis at the time, and that likely left Mr. Long as the person in charge of the store when this robbery went down. After the Civil War, Mr. McClure then was elected Missouri's 19th governor, became Governor McClure, and served one term in the Reconstruction period after the Civil War, helping rebuild it after. But after that robbery, Doobie decided he was done with steamboating on the Osage River, and the very next summer he moved to Ontario, Canada, with only $15 in his pocket, and accepted a position at a hat manufacturing company for $18 a day, with most of that going to pay his room and board. He's only making $1 a day after he paid his room and board. So in 1867, the company he was working for folded financially, and the other person, another individual working there, George Harvey Bisbee, and Mr. Long had the opportunity to reorganize the business and then form it into a new structure, which they called Long and Bisbee Wool Merchants. At that point, Jeannie joined them up in Hamilton as well in 1867, and they began the operation of Long and Bisbee. And Mr. Bisbee, who was born in West Winfield, New York in 1836, and entered into general mercantile trade with his father, he was generally a bookkeeper through most of his early career, though. He moved to Canada to become a bookkeeper for the felt hat industry, and then he became a partner with Mr. Long in 1867. Now, they did a substantial operation in wool business. They weren't just a small little operation. This is a publication from the Birmingham of Canada, published by the Times Printing Company in Ontario. I'd like to read you this one. So, among the largest dealers of wool in Canada or the United States, the firm of Long and Bisbee stands foremost. Their warehouse is a substantial stone building. Their reputation stands high throughout the whole of British North America. In fact, wherever wool is marketed in any land, the shipments of wool to the firm are made from every province and dominion, and foreign grades are imported by them for manufacturers in Canada. So as you can see, this is not a small operation. This is one of the largest wool operations in all of North America. And at this point in time, transportation is going to be a bit of an issue. So this is their warehouse in Hamilton, Ontario, a 3-story, very nice building. And inside that building, they would have been storing very large bales of wool in approximately 500-pound increment bales. These shipping records here are ones that I pulled from the Hamilton Spectator, a newspaper that was going through their exports by rail. You get a kind of an idea of the amount of shipment they were doing. Rail wouldn't have been the only way they were shipping. In fact, the bulk of their transportation would likely have been by the waterway, because in Hamilton, you've got a lot more access to the waterway. But generally speaking, to get wool from the mill to the warehouse, you're going to be dealing with horse and carriage type situations. So you've got carts that are loaded with the 500-pound bales of wool and then transported in from the warehouse. They're then transported out on rail in larger operations or by barge in the same kind of idea. And with Doobie's history of steamboating on the Osage River, this would have been right up his alley with his experience. Now this picture here shows Lake Ontario, and as you can see there, Hamilton is kind of the far left or western edge of that lake. And in between Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, we've got Niagara Falls. Now Niagara Falls poses a pretty big obstacle for shipping through that region. So most of the cargo has to disembark and then re-embark on the lower lake to then move out to open ocean. Hamilton, being positioned on the far western edge of that Lake Ontario, is ideally situated for the imports and exports of anything really, but wool ideally. So they would move stuff through there, and that was a very lucrative operation for them. This is Mr. Bisbee's house, which was located in downtown Hamilton. It was eventually converted into a maternity hospital called Casa Maria, but then torn down in 1951 for use as a parking lot in what is now still the larger hospital complex. Mr. Long's house, which was known as Inglewood Estate, owned by several reputable people before and after him, was converted recently into condos. So we were able to see some interior pictures of that, which I'll slide through a few of those. Very nice entry, very grand detail in all of their living environment here, kind of living room, very nice. Ornate staircases and banisters, very nice woodwork and detailing. And this would have, like I said, been his private estate as a single bachelor with no wife or kids. William Dewey then expanded his investments as he did well with his wool business, acquiring several other manufacturing companies, including some copper and silver mining businesses. Now, when you invest and diversify into that many businesses, you begin to develop a significant personal wealth, which Dewey did very much. His partner here, George Harvey Bisbee, on December 15, 1890, married his sister, Jeannie, and at the time of their marriage, George was 54 and Jeannie was 51 years old, so we're not talking about a young couple here that are running off to be in love. They might have been in love, I have no idea, but this is probably more financial planning. So at the time, Mr. Long was also a charter member of the Hamilton Health Association. Along with Mr. Bisbee, they donated 96 acres for the Mountain Tuberculosis Sanatorium, which was established in 1906. They also, Mr. Long donated $75,000 for a nurse's home to be built on that same campus. And this is a picture of the nurse's home with one of the young, probably nurse's daughters there in the background of that photo. Inside they had their living quarters as well as a lounge area, which in the downstairs was a very nice kind of nurse's lounge, which was very well known in that building. This building still stands. It was most recently used as a daycare, so that nurse's lounge was where they had kind of their nap area with all the cubbies and nap mats. The building is in a little bit of disrepair, but as part of a housing project development, which I believe the main offices are going to be located in this building. It's been designated a historic building and they're going to be preserving that. So George then passed away May 11th, 1908, was buried in the family plot in West Winfield Cemetery. On his passing, his wife Jeannie inherited the bulk of his estate, valued at close to $800,000. So it was a pretty significant inheritance that she acquired at that point. She then began enacting all of the philanthropic endeavors that they had planned. They had started the Bisbee Hall in West New York, but after his death, Jeannie had to see the building finished, so it was finished in 1909 under her husband's name. Enlarging the same basic plan that they used for that, they made Long Memorial Hall, and that's called a Beaux Arts style. Long Hall was inspired, has probably inspired the courthouse, which was built a couple years later in a similar style. That style of architecture emphasizes classic symmetry, columns, repeating facade designs, arched openings, grand entrances, and ornamental detailings. We have all of those things represented in our building with the red brick, smooth symmetrical limestone accents, two-story main block building flanked by one-story flat-top L's with the Tuscan columns, monumental doorways, arched top under an open pediment, elaborate transoms and surrounds. Back section of the building has what's called a mansard roof, which is a type of gambrel roof. And you can see all of those things very nicely in the detail of these building architecture. Very well preserved. The interior has been through several restorations, so we have all of the original molding still very well preserved. A side-by-side comparison of Long Hall to the left and Bisbee Hall to the right here. I love these side-by-side photos. You can see a lot of similarities, but also many differences as well. I can sit here and look at these and find the differences back and forth for an hour. As they stand now, the major difference between the two is that Long Memorial Hall still has its name plaque above the top pediment, where Bisbee Hall has had it's removed. I'm not sure if it became structurally unsound or if it was damaged in the storm or something of that nature, but their name plaque has been removed and reduced down to kind of the building top there. Otherwise, the building looking very nice as well. Theirs is being used as a library, which I think is also kind of nice. So Duke then passed away February 13, 1920 in Canada and is buried in the Masonic Cemetery. He also left his estate valued at nearly $2 million to his sister Jeannie, which was another substantial inheritance. This is a photo of the long plot over in the Masonic Cemetery here in Farmington. Then a few years later, Jeannie passed away on March 24, 1921. Her funeral was held in Bisbee Memorial Hall in West Winfield according to her request, and she was buried alongside her husband in the Bisbee family plot. So historical uses of Long Memorial Hall, it's been an auditorium, a dance floor. Our public library was held here until 1980, and the city lights and water in the other L to the other side. This photo here is a nice one with that old car out front too. In the basement, we had a bowling alley. So these photos here are some of the patrons of that very bowling alley. As you can see, it was a 4-lane bowling alley, And bowling alleys of this time were different than you might know a bowling alley to be now. This is a different bowling alley, but it'll give you an idea of the type of bowling alley. So we're talking about pin setter era, when you had kids kind of down on one end, the bowler would send the ball down, knock over the pins, and then the kids would restack and back up and send the ball down to shoot back over to the bowlers, and it would kind of go from there. So we had 4 lanes, so ours would have looked like this. You'd have had kids down on one end setting up pins, you'd have had people down on the other end in chairs kind of waiting to keep in score, and balls going back and forth in the process. So I believe that Mr. Cozine actually has some experience of being a pin setter at the original bowling alley. So there aren't any remnants of that bowling alley still in place in the basement. That was removed sometime in the 1950s. The public library was still over there where the city clerk's office is now, and as we heard from Mr. Bob, the stories of how that reached many of the kids that grew up here, going to school here, was very profound. Continues to be at the library. So current uses of the Long Memorial Hall, we have the auditorium and the stage, which we're using here. We also have the city clerk's office, and downstairs the municipal court is held. We used to have the city board meetings held here as well, but they've been moved over to the new building. So Long Memorial Hall, we have several events going in the next couple of months to commemorate the 100 years of Long Memorial Hall. We've got Jeannie's Tea Party happening October 12th at Long Memorial Hall with trolley rides over to Long Park with tours of the Long House. So it'll be a very long day. They're appropriate for about 12 and up, casual tea party attire encouraged. And following that, we'll also be on October 9th having a Roaring 20 celebration dance with live music from the jazz band Arcadia Dance Orchestra, which is a great band there, so you definitely want to check that out. We'll also be doing a Voices of the Past Downtown Cemetery tour, where if you'd like, you can come meet Doobie over at the cemetery and hear some more of his story. The entire month of December, the Long Hall also hosts the Winter Wonderland and Santa greeting as well, so make sure you check that out. This completely transforms for that event. All right, I think that is all that I have. I thank you very much for your time, your attention, and I wish you a great afternoon.